Okay, we're a little past 5:30. I'll call this meeting to order. Karen, can we get a roll call, please?
Blake Roberts,
Here.
Judy Huntash, Sam Husnick, Mark Finneman,
Here.
Jennifer Lorge,
Here.
Josh Archer.
And I'm here as well.
Mayor Bain, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay. It's a long pause. I'll ask all those that are able to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Agenda passed. Next item, approve minutes from our regular meeting from July 22nd. Those items in your packet.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes passed. Next item, approve minutes from the workshop meeting from August 12th.
I move we approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, items 7A and 7B, some updates on the Headwaters 1, 2, 3 projects. Ryan, do you want to get us started with the wetland delineation results?
I think Dan's pulling something on the screen just so we can see the figures and we
Yep.
can talk off of those. There we go. So there will be two figures. One will be the north half of the property, and just because of the size of the property, the second figure will be the south half. The site does contain quite a few wetlands. On the northern half, there are types 1, 2, and 3. And then on the southern half, there's types 1, 2, 3, and 7. So 7 are obviously areas that you wish you didn't have on a site because those are pretty much impossible to mitigate right now, especially since there is no wetland banks that consist of a type 7 to purchase wetland credits out of. But in essence, what the site does allow, though, all the areas that are farmable, you could mitigate those. The 2-to-1 mitigations is what would be required in the future. Just taking the rough area with wetland pricing banks right now, so 4.3 acres times 2, you're up to 8.6. Ballpark year round with the current banks in the area, about 80,000 an acre. So that's just roughly shy of $700,000 if you came out and cleaned out the whole site of wetlands, the type 1 through 3s. You probably would look at a site this large on doing some on-site mitigation with the disturbed areas. That would be a 5-year monitoring period, and you're probably looking at the cost half of that then with that. So, and you would have the ability to, especially in that southern area, if that was an area to be retained or a portion, whatever area that might be identified in a redevelopment site, you could create in essence your own bank too with what you see here. So, looking at the figure, just to kind of explain what you're seeing, you see each of the types of the wetland delineation types have a different color code that shows what type it is, so you can match up in the legend to that area within the delineation. You'll see soil borings with the black dots. At least one will be taken within the wetland delineated area, and then one upland outside of that area to confirm the soils. And then the connecting yellow line in between shows with those two are connected. So on the screen, let's just go to the bottom left. You see where that W6 is. You can see the one soil boring was taken within the wetland, which was a type 1 right there, and then one was taken out of the upland. So that's the A means in the wetland and the B is the upland. So a lot of different naming conventions, but just shows you that the two soil borings are taken in each area. So this delineation was submitted to the TET panel in July and received formal approval here. So this is an official wetland delineation approved. you look at some of our older historic aerials that were done through this process, you did conventionally see a lot of wetlands that pre-existed too, so you can imagine some of this property's obviously tiled and has been tiled for farming purposes. Going through a mitigation plan, it would be worthwhile trying to get some no-loss application along the south side of Headwaters Parkway, where some of that stuff might have been self-inflicted, part of the 2005 grading that occurred with the original Headwaters plats and subdivision, that could potentially decrease that acres of wetland that would be mitigated with any site redevelopment. Might seem like a lot of wetlands. You know, it's kind of what we've seen in a lot of the areas that have been developing. You know, this is some lowland in the city, and these are just things that, characteristics that are worked around within development, trying to minimize those impacts. Or in this case, you know, you got a lot of area where you could look at doing some on-site mitigation and creating a bank for other development, or the developer itself could create a bank that could sell back some of those wetland banking areas for other development in the area. So, you know, going more and talking about wetland banking, obviously there's a lack of wetland banks out there, and there has been, and we've utilized ourselves on a local aspect the roadway replacement program. And some of you guys might have heard a couple years ago that account basically went zero, and then it's legislation emergency put some money into that fund to allow for some of that to occur. But so overall out in the market right now, there is a shortage of wetland banks. So Rice Creek's preference would be to do on-site mitigation. This is in Rice Creek Watershed District, but you still would have the ability to purchase wetland credits. So if more supply came onto the market, that 80,000 per acre certainly would come down. When we mitigated the northeast corner of this site, we got it for around 24,000 an acre. So stuff that does come and go. Just right now there's this low supply, so that's in essence where we're at with the wetland delineation. Is done, been approved by the TEP panel. So you have a document that's really valuable for 5 years. Not saying that year 6 that some things will stand. You know, you would go through a re-application process, and if anything need to be field verified, it would. But as long as things continue, land use continues the same, stuff shouldn't change.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
To do on-site, how many acres would you figure that would take up?
So if whatever your acres you're disturbing, you have to mitigate 2 to 1. You can either do that through purchasing wetland credits or on-site mitigation. That means establishing a wetland on-site at a 2 to 1 ratio, but at year 5 is when it gets approved. So you go through a 5-year monitoring period for that wetland to get established to the level that it needs to be. Sometimes you can achieve that a little faster than the 5-year period, but officially approval won't be signed off until that 5-year monitoring period. The city of Forest Lake did do that with the airport when some of the, you know, that was kind of before we were involved with that, but I know you went through a 5-year period there too. Headwaters and Fenway Athletic Fields did some of that as well. So it's common on your bigger site developments because it's cheaper.
So you start in year 1 and you want to mitigate something. If you have enough site, you can do that. Otherwise, you got to look at the whole site and say, I have to judge this over a 5-year period before I can start mitigations.
No, if you got to get an approved mitigation plan. That could, again, 2 options. You either purchase wetland credits or you do on-site mitigation. If we know that we're not going to be disturbing or impacting the area that was categorized as a type 7, because there's nothing available in the market and the Corps is not going to sign off on that. Potentially then you expand that wetland, right? Whether it's type 1, 2, or 3, and at the end of that 5-year monitoring period, that area that you mitigated would be your area that you impacted offset.
Okay.
So you could go out there right now and, you know, if you've got 4.3 acres, you could go do a mitigation bank and make it 8.6. And therefore, when the development came, as long as we're still at a 2 to 1 ratio in the future, you could come and swipe out all that stuff. You could start doing your wetland mitigation now. doesn't have to wait for development. But without knowing some layout or concepts, you're guessing where that might wanna be. Or, in the future, if the market is better for inventory or supply in wetland banks, you can take it, hopefully purchase wetland credits at a lower cost than what we're seeing right now in this area for wetland banks.
Off-site mitigation, is that 2 to 1 as well? Is that 3 to 1?
I don't know about offsites. They're gonna most likely require you to mitigate in the same watershed.
Okay, but like the city has property down by the Pratt Trade, south of that in the treat area.
Oh, yeah, that would be,
That's within the
Yeah,
watershed.
yep.
Okay, so you start looking at those kind of trades too.
Yeah.
Well, we have plenty of land here to talk about. And everything under the 7 category is mitigatable, if that's a word.
correct. And some of these areas might provide nice buffers between land uses or whatever would come forward. So,
I'm sure.
I mean, you see wetlands around sites everywhere in the metro.
Okay. You see, you say a piece of this was compelled by the Parkway development in terms of what, an artificial creation of a wetland?
That's
So
what
there is some of that.
some evidence is shown within the historic areas.
I can see a lot of ways you can consolidate your wetlands and create an image along the parkway that would alter the really defined perimeters of the wetlands. So I can see some real promise in all of that.
Yep. Obviously, a lot more wetlands than we thought would be out there, so, the field work took a little longer, but we're done and got an approved document, and which certainly save any future development a lot of time. This is kind of what Chestnut Creek looked like, so you guys kind of looking at this like, it's just what it is in this part of the metro. Lino Lakes faces this, Hugo has some of this,
Right.
just soil conditions and kind of at the split of the drainage, right?
And if I could just add one thing, so what we just at the last, it kind of ties in with the next agenda item, the technology corridor update, but specific to this, well, on the wetland side of it, the last meeting they were talking about, some of these centers are now using on-site ponding tied to wetlands to kind of mitigate their own cooling system use. So some of these wetlands that are here may be an advantage for that, because what they're doing is they're building man-made ponds. Some of the cooling water, instead of just being dumped in the sewer system, is held on site, and then if it overflows, goes into wetlands. So theoretically, this wetland, the amount that's out there could actually help get some of that, make the site more enticing from an ecological standpoint, because they already have that natural overflow storage there baked into the site. So, well, it looks like a lot, there could be an advantage for that, as a data center usage.
In the areas that are development, obviously you're gonna have a lot of impervious area. Having that surrounded by wetlands is great for a flooding control, because you got built-in storage capacity in wetlands that absorb and shrink during dry and wet times, right? So that's another benefit of having wetlands surrounded by a bunch of impervious areas, so.
I see a lot of flexibility in what you can do with the property, so even though there's a lot of little moments in there that are wetlands, it seems like you could really manipulate a whole lot.
And you look at some of the bigger areas that are, kind of condensed out of your area of working, so. And you get kind of in the middle of the site, there's just a bunch of little stuff too, so.
Yep.
Ryan, I thought I saw this number and I'm not finding it now. So what's the summary of the 123 acres, what's classified as, and I get there's different types of wetlands, but what's classified as? Is there a percentage of that 123 acres that has that classification?
So this is just 2 pages of, I don't even know how many pages that was, the full document, it's thick.
Okay.
So it'll go down and break with all the classifications of each of the wetlands. I don't know that off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
But the city does have the final full document, it's just, you can't email it, it's that big,
No.
so.
And that final, and personally, I don't need to see that level of detail, but I know that somebody may want to. So that full document though becomes part of the assets available for this particular project,
And the
correct?
city has that.
Perfect, very good. Other questions on the wetland delineation study? Chris,
Madam
please.
President, if I could, just a quick question for Ryan. There probably isn't a difference from being able to develop, whether it's wetland delineation type 2, type 1, or type 3, is there? If it's considered wetland, you avoid those areas, correct?
No, or you would mitigate them.
You mitigate,
So
okay. So,
you're not gonna be able to avoid all the wetlands. The 1 through 3, you can mitigate at a 2-to-1 ratio.
so what's confusing to me is that there's a lot of contours and stuff on this map as well. I was wondering if there would be a way, and maybe that's in the final report, just to identify the areas that are wetlands without the contour lines on it. To me, this, from a marketing perspective, seems a little bit more complicated than the site really probably is.
Yeah.
Is that possible to take off some layers and just?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'll page through the document too, because there's probably 50+ figures within the document itself. And maybe something be better visual from just somebody that doesn't deal with it all the time, and I can email it to you and see what you think, or otherwise we can just retrofit a document that cleans it up and much easier to read, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Ryan? Very good. Thank you, Brian. Next item, Phase 1 environmental summary. Dan, I believe you're walking us through.
Yeah, it's basically kind of it's a quick summary. So we have, again, the document that came back from the Phase 1 is about 450 pages. I included the executive summary in the packet. Basically, end of the day, the Phase 1 environmental came back that there's no indication there was ever toxic material stored on site. So, I mean, it did in essence get a clean bill of health from that perspective. So that kind of helps to eliminate any of a developer's potential hesitation from digging into that ground, because it does appear to be just farm use with a homestead on it. Ryan even made mention before the meeting that he thinks potentially where the homestead and the septic field was located is potentially over where the roundabout was, so that dirt's already been moved. So moving forward, there's nothing really that indicates major concern from developers, so it's a nice document to have. So when selectors are looking for it, they can kind of take a look at that. We're not trying to sell them a toxic waste site, that it actually does have a clean bill of health. So in essence, the Phase 1 came back. We have a good clean bill of health for that, and that'll be available for any potential site selector who wants to take a look at the site's Phase 1.
Any questions for Dan on the environmental summary? No question, just wanted to confirm and just reinforce that both of those items become part of assets of the Headwaters 123. Have you already linked those to the Invest in Forest Lake site?
They have not been linked yet, but that actually dovetails nicely into my next
Perfect.
update, unless anybody has kind of final questions on the Phase 1. So kind of tying into the next, I just want to do an update on the technology corridor, and I think what I'll do is I'll kind of focus specifically on kind of the next steps for the Headwaters 123, and then Chris can kind of talk about some of the partnership opportunities that have come out of this as the corridor has been launched. To Mara's comment on the two assets, the Phase 1 and the wetland delineation, both of those will be linked on the Invest in Forest Lake website, so they will be available to site selectors who can go and say, you know, if we're talking about the phone, we say, yeah, the Phase 1 and wetland delineation's there, they can go to the site, they can pull the document. The full 400-page document for both of them will be available to both of them. One thing that having these documents available is allowing us to do is Connexus is pulling together, is partnering with Great River Energy to do kind of that. If you recall back in, I think it was June or July, we kind of talked about doing that potential scoping. You're looking for a data center site, like all the way kind of top to bottom, looking at all the different layers. And instead of going that direction, we kind of looked at getting together with Great River Energy to be kind of trained in on what does it take to, you know, evaluate sites to see what criteria are needed for positioning a site for use as a data center. We do now have that, that training is now being scheduled. So later in this year, Connexus is bringing Great River Energy out. We're going to be basically walking through an overview of the site assessment requirements. So going through, you know, the sites that meet this level, this ones are good candidates for certification. So at the last technology corridor meeting, they kind of talked about the value of third-party certification for these sites. If you recall, a few years ago, kind of the biggest trend was the shovel-ready sites with the certification from DEED. Basically, if it got stamped shovel-ready, it met certain criteria. That criteria does not currently exist kind of across the board for data centers or technology-based businesses. The site selectors were talking about establishing some of that criteria. So kind of in its place, there are certain companies that go out there and will certify sites, and they'll say like Deloitte, for example, will go out and certify the site, and the Deloitte certification does carry weight within the industry. But going through a Deloitte certification, there's a cost associated with that, and you want to make sure that the asset you put forward probably meets some of those pre-flight qualifications before you go through and say, okay, I want to put a third-party, shovel-ready assessment on this. So that's kind of the intent of this workshop, is to look through and say, okay, here's the criteria to look for in parcels of land to bring them forward as site or as ready for that third-party assessment. Since we've had a lot of research done on the Forest Lake site, the site that they actually want to use in the workshop is the Headwaters 123. So not only are we going to basically be trained in how to do it, we're actually going to walk the site through the pre-classifications for that. So it's due to the fact that we do have this phase 1 done, that we do have the wetland delineation done. We're actually going to be talking about real numbers, not just kind of theoretical. So that workshop will be more, kind of productive in a sense, but also at the end of that workshop, we should have a pretty good idea as to, does this site really raise the level of having a third-party, assessment on it? Is it going to generate the return back on the cost of having that, say a Deloitte come in and do that certification? So we do have that scheduled for later in the year. And again, the intent of that is to train the different municipalities and evaluating their own sites. Benefit to us, though, our site's actually going to be evaluated. So we're going to go through and kind of take a look at all the previous studies that we've done on it, the current studies that we have, and relook at this from a numbers perspective. Additionally, Bruce is also, a company reached out to him that does 3D modeling of sites. So what they do is they fly a drone, low height, I think it's what it's called, low height drone with like a LiDAR system on it, and will actually develop a 3D model of the ground. And that 3D model then becomes kind of another piece for the portfolio of it. But it also is advantageous where if you have people who are starting to do some site layouts, you already have a file that then you can just say, oh, by the way, if you're starting to look at this, here's a 3D overlay. So they have that. It kind of gets you another step forward in the process. So again, they needed a site to demo this on to see if this is worth doing. Connexus has offered to pay for the flyover and the modeling. So there will be, we're working on just kind of finalizing the modeling of it. So we should get another asset out of this study as well. So we're developing quite a nice portfolio of materials for this. So when we get down to that point where we start having selectors reach out, we can start to say what boxes we have checked. We're starting to get quite a few of those boxes checked, which puts us in a really good position in the market. And if Chris wants us to talk about some of the partnerships.
Madam President, the members, just a couple of quick updates for you. We did launch the website on August 1st, and we are tracking the visitors that go to the website. And just in that first month alone, we had 30 visits from Minnesota, 15 from the U.S., and 3 from international companies that were looking at this website. So we're excited about the recognition that it's getting. I think it certainly helped to have the article in the Star Tribune and other local papers as well. So the word's getting out there that this corridor is now something we're trying to promote and market to technology companies. And the website will really help us step up and not wait for those calls to come in, but really use that as a way to push this out to folks that are interested in the Twin Cities area. And if they are, if they happen to hear about us at a data center show in Phoenix or Dallas, we want them to be directed right to this website and then eventually right to the cities and to the sites that Dan was just talking about. That information will be available now at their fingertips. And no matter where you're at in the world, you'll have access to that information, and it'll be really good, up-to-date information. We are also getting a lot of calls from people that want to be partners with us in the corridor. People are excited about where this is headed. So we're starting to have conversations now with the Greater Metropolitan Workforce Council and with DEED and Greater MSP, the folks that are really at the table with these site selectors saying, we want to be able to help you promote and market this effort. We're starting to talk to the K-12 schools now. We know that one of the questions that a site selector is going to ask is that if we relocate a technology company to your community, can you help us find talent to fill the jobs? And so we're starting to talk to the Forest Lake High School, which serves almost all of the corridor with the exception of Centerville. Century College, the University of Minnesota, which I didn't even realize, but they have a coding boot camp for computer, for coding. It's a 6-month boot camp, and so that's something we're reaching out to them and say, how do we work together? Because if we get that question, we want to be able to say, yes, the University of Minnesota has that boot camp coding program in place already. Same with Met Council, we're, as Dan mentioned, starting to look at opportunities. One of the things that data centers historically have been known for is the use of water for cooling purposes. And so we're exploring opportunities to say, okay, what if we use reclaimed water? And so instead of discharging it, what if we recycle that water and use that for cooling purposes? And just looking at that as an opportunity. What if we get a call from a call center, site selector working in a call center, and they say they need 300 to 400 people in 60 days? Could we find those people? And well, maybe there's an opportunity with the Met Transit. Those buses that leave downtown St. Paul right now, the express buses come here empty. What if we could fill those buses in the Twin Cities, bring those people up here, and then at the end of the day, instead of having them go back empty, but go back with people that would potentially fill jobs up here. So we're looking at that as a possibility as well. So there's lots of different layers, and we're talking to builders and site selectors and fiber providers about this opportunity, and they're all pretty excited about it, and they want to help us get the word out. So they're asking us if they could be listed on the website, and we'll say, yep, we'll do that as an alliance, but you also have to list this on your website, so there's mutual marketing going on for both of them. And we did have one more city ask if they could join us, and we said no. The corridor is in place. We are marketing this corridor already. The work is already well underway, and so we're not letting additional cities join the corridor initiative. So just kind of a high-level update for you, but we're pretty excited about where this is headed, and I'll continue to give you updates as we get the monthly reports on where the site visits are coming from.
Thank you, Chris. Go ahead.
Question for Dan or maybe Ryan. Does the low-level three-dimensional flyover provide a more finite and precise topo versus the ones we see from the altitude flyovers that have happened?
I would say yes. I mean, I haven't seen I went to the company's website that does this work, and I mean, it seems like it's pretty more detailed than what we currently have. I just, maybe Ryan could answer a little bit better, but I think my initial looking at it, yeah, there's more detail to the flyover.
I would assume they're fine with the technology that's gonna give you within a few tenths of accuracy.
So a developer or builder can rely on it as being their topo listing?
As long as it's not tall grasses.
Oh,
You know, if you had a bunch of alfalfa in the field, you're gonna hit that top
Okay.
of alfalfa. But here it's pretty minimal, you're gonna be able to penetrate down, so. I mean, you would have stuff that they would work with on a grading plan.
okay, that's all I needed, thanks.
They use drones a lot in mines now to go measure quantities. So it's got that drone, they'll fly a drone down a street side project now and measure concrete.
Okay.
So
If there were corn in the field, it could work, or is that still a disruption they couldn't read?
I would say that's pretty thick.
Okay.
Dan, you mentioned 2 different additional projects that have come up for the site. One is the workshop session, of which the Headwaters 123 is going to be the case study. That is firm and solidified, correct, right? That's
Correct, yep.
That's
Yeah,
well
I think it's in
underway.
December sometime.
December 4th.
Yeah.
Is the Connexus drone modeling, is that also decided? And I guess my question ultimately is, do you need anything from us to encourage that? What are the remaining steps here to make that final?
It seemed pretty firm. Last time I talked to Bruce about it, it seemed pretty firm. I think he was waiting just on a few details from the vendor. Kind of hadn't had an update for me, but it sounded like it was fairly firm at that point. It was just kind of, I asked him whatever he needs from me to get the site flown, we're happy to provide that, and whatever permissions he needs, we can get. So it sounded like it was pretty firm last time I talked to him.
I think both are tremendous assets to that project, so whatever we can do to encourage that or provide what's needed to make that happen, I think this group would be very open to those conversations. And then is the anticipation for the modeling to be done here yet in 2019? Is that a 2020 project? I don't know the calendars of when those things typically take place.
My assumption would be that it was a 19 project. It sounded like, I think they were hoping, in the conversation I had, was hoping to have the modeling done before the workshop, just so we could start to take a look at what value does this add to the assessment side of the coin. Don't know that for sure. I know there's a few things that are, I haven't been a part of those conversations with the vendor, so my assumption would be that it would be done this fall yet.
Very good. Other questions related to Technology Corridor or the
I'd
Headwaters
just like to make a
projects?
comment. I just want to say I'm really impressed with the forward progress that you've got here, and the cooperation you're making with other communities. I'm really impressed. It's good to see it moving forward.
And just to that point, I will also echo what Jenny said about Chris's partnerships. At the last meeting, we had the Met Council there early on, so we talk about wastewater reuse as a possibility. So if these projects come forward, it's not the first time they've heard about this corridor. So they're doing a phenomenal job of bringing a potential partner to the table early on, so they're on board from day one versus trying to 11th hour bring these things in. So there's a lot of forward thinking there, which it's been impressive, for sure.
It's great. It's a nice list of assets that's being accumulated, so thank you very much. Next item, Airport Business Park property listing. Dan, are you walking us through this?
Yes. President, members of the EDA, here to talk about the Airport Business Park listing. One of the reasons why it's on the agenda for tonight is that when I was looking through the EDA files, the current listing agreement that we have, I discovered it was expired, so we're in a good opportunity right now to kind of take a look at what's been done, where it's currently positioned, is it positioned correctly, and then to kind of take a look at it, what we want to do kind of moving forward with these airport business park parcels. I kind of wanted to, before we kind of dive into that, I'll just give a quick overview of the parcels in general, take a look at the current position in the market, and then talk about the next steps for it. For those, just so everybody's on the same page, the Airport Business Park is located right next to the Forest Lake Airport. You have 97, 61. It's these 4 parcels that are in here. And here's just a closer view of it, and see if my pen will work on this. So it's actually these 4 here that I'm marking up right now are the 4 parcels that we currently have for sale in the Airport Business Park. The development of this started in approximately 2006 is when we started looking at developing the Airport Business Park. If you remember back in 2006, the real estate market was going full gas, and things were selling relatively quickly. City made an investment in the Airport Business Park here to encourage some industrial investment in the city of Forest Lake. So it starts going through the development process back in 2006. City makes the investment, puts some capital in to do the infrastructure, doing the stormwater, water and sewer are in place at these sites, get them more shovel ready. They go on the market in 2008, which is the same year that the housing economy, the brakes went on, the recession started. So these hit the market right about the same time that the wheels fall off the economy. So since 2008, these lots have basically sat in their current state. There has been one that was developed, which you see here on the north end, which is the Team Vantage site. That is the one that, at the Airport Business Park, that is the one lot that was developed. So the city has invested the cash that's in there, and the thought on the initial investment was that when these parcels sold, the money that we recouped through the sale of the parcel would then go back and pay back the investment that the city made in getting the infrastructure there. But again, since we haven't sold them, we still have a negative fund balance in that development fund right now due to the fact that we've not recouped the investment because we have not sold the parcels of land. So kind of looking at it in its current market position, I did include the current marketing materials that are in your packet. But when you look at it, what's currently being done is that it is currently listed through the listing agent on MNCAR. So I started looking at this, and I kind of put on my, developer hat, looking at it from outside the area to take a look at what these parcels look like, and just kind of feeling around how is it currently positioned in the market. The first thing I see here when I looked at it was, well, it's 4 individual sites. It's currently listed as one 15-acre site for $2.12 million, which would be great if I was looking for a 15-acre site. But when you dive into the actual marketing materials, there's a misalignment. And all of a sudden, now you see it's 4 sites that aren't, in total are 15 acres. So there's a little bit of misalignment in the marketplace. Additionally, when you look at the listing agreement, I believe the price that we are able to list it at is $275 to $325 a square foot. The current listing has it at that upper end of the per square foot ratio. So when you break it all down, it's currently on the market 15 acres at $325 a square foot. And again, if you start looking at kind of market averages, you're looking at, that should be right around $2 a square foot is about the current market average right now. So while we're not completely out of the market, we're definitely on the higher end of the market, which could help to kind of indicate why we're not getting a lot of response to this. So to kind of take the market position back to the next level, I did reach out to the appraiser that did the McCullough appraisal and just kind of asked him, I said, looking for kind of that third-party assessment at these two, where are we kind of in current market conditions now? Where should we be on a per square foot basis, kind of given our location, the condition of the land, the kind of the site conditions that it sees. The first question he had, because he both pulled up the same topo map here, and the first question that he looked at was, do you want this done as one site or do you want this as 4 individual sites? His assessment was the two that you see here, these 2 sites here and here are going to be pretty much come back as mirror images of each other. They're roughly the same size, have roughly the same qualifications to them. So he said those 2 should come back in about the same market value. He did comment though, from what he saw, he goes, this site, these 2 lots over here, he said they could potentially see some market challenges to them. First thing he noticed was they're both irregular lot sizes, which makes citing something on there a little bit more challenging when you start factoring in setbacks and dimensions. The lot scales back. He's like, not to say that you can't ever develop on there. He just said there's some potential challenges to those irregular lot sizes. Second thing that was noticed was the fact that these 2 sites are also impacted by wetlands. So not only do you have irregular lot sizes on those 2, you also have some wetland impacts as well. Again, all of that doesn't say that you can never develop it. You just probably potentially have to price those differently in the market because of those challenges that are there. So right now, I have not gotten back from him. He have not gotten what it would cost to do the appraisal for this potential parcel, or what the timeline and turnaround would be. Initially, he did say it would be a little bit easier than the last one, since finding comparables would be a little bit easier because they already are developed. Versus, if you recall, the last time we kind of took raw land, had to develop what the envisioned use was going to be, and then have to find comparables based on that in the future use of it. This is already its current state, so he did say that process is going to be a little bit easier. But I think getting an appraisal done for this parcel gives us that current market price, allows us to take a look at where are we in the market, and then kind of allows us to adjust our marketing plan accordingly. Initially when I kind of looked at this, just, my first glance at it was, it's currently being marketed a little on the confusing side, where you start looking at the marketing materials and you start to see the individual sites listed, here, and not the total on in-car listings. I mean, there's just, from a consistency standpoint, if we could just make sure those are consistent across the board. Also listing them based on the actual individual acre sizes, not in total, might help to draw some interest out, because we start to see, every now and again we'll get a request for a 3 to 5 acre site or 5 to 10 acre site. And if those selectors are looking for those sites, making sure that we have them easily, in market and in locations where they're looking as well, would be advantageous. And then once the appraisal comes back, kind of once we start looking at this, kind of develop, evaluating, current broker, and take a look at, do we want to switch brokers? Do we want to go to a different broker at that point, different marketing strategy moving forward? So it's a good opportunity right now to kind of take a look at this whole thing. I mean, obviously it's been on the market since 2008, not a lot of activities happening to it. And then, by remarketing, kind of freshening that up, potentially helps to kind of increase its, exposure in the marketplace, and hopefully can get some more interest generated with this. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or any comments regarding the Airport Business Park.
Please.
So we've had a specific broker for quite some time. I forget how many years, but they came before us in the past and they talked about re-upping, and so we did with them. Have you ever had any, or have they ever presented currently, something current, about what they're experiencing in the marketing? So we have we have a min-carb and we have a certain number of finite but fixed graphics, and we have some statistics that don't talk about too much flexibility. Do they get people knocking on the door, or could they come and talk to us and educate us a bit as to what they've experienced? Because maybe nobody ever knocks on the door because of the price tag or the finite configuration. And maybe somebody has knocked on the door to say, you know, can we talk about it? Can we negotiate it? Can we have flexibility on site? Can the price tag move? I just don't know if any of those discussions have ever taken place.
I don't know what the broker's experiencing. I know last year had a few calls, and, you know, a couple of times there'd be, you know, when I would send this information out, I would say, you know, if you're looking at potentially a 6-acre site, here is the possibility of combining a couple of them, you know, depending upon the project. But I think the key is, you know, is that kind of that neutral third-party appraisal, have somebody come in who's not, I mean, if you look at a real estate agent, I mean, they're incentivized to sell at the highest point if their commission's based on a percentage of parcels sold. I mean, and it also benefits the city too by selling at a higher price point. However, if we're sitting on this for the next 10 years, you know, we have capital tied up for 10 years that could be used for other purposes. So, you know, knowing that if we bring the price down to a certain point, we can still pay back the fund balance deficit that's there and get these things sold. So these are back on the tax rolls generating revenue. That all needs to be part of the conversation. And my recommendation would be to start out with the appraisal, because you're going to get that. My estimation, you're going to get an honest, somebody who's doesn't have a dog in the fight, basically, a horse in the race on what the value of the property is. They're going to give you here's what these 3 acres should sell for, and you should probably look at, you know, these other 2 irregular shaped sites at a reduced per square foot price because of those challenges that are there. And then maybe from there, look at, can we combine these 2 irregular shaped ones, make a larger parcel? But right now, I mean, it's going to be honest, you're kind of making a guess in terms of what the market's going to bear on that, just because if you recall, the last assessment also gave pretty valuable insight in terms of what the market absorption was for these sites, so we can take a look. Because I also think it's disingenuous to say if we price these right, these things are going to sell off, they're going to fly off the shelf in the next 6 months. I mean, I think we got to look at what the market's actually going to absorb. So it also would say, based on these sites, you're looking at 3 or 4 or 5-year absorption rates. And again, just telling the house to enlighten that. And if you look at the cost of that appraisal, I think that's a solid investment to make in terms of positioning these for future sale.
I have a challenge to the appraisal idea. I just like, you know, take the 2 that are on the airport border, those 2 sites. So an appraiser is going to look at what each of them say. On the one, I can get 25,000 square feet of development. The other one, I can get another 25,000 square feet of development. Is there the flexibility, and this is the most rigid one, to look at saying, well, there's a 50,000 square foot development potential. Does that change how he looks at his pricing? Because I think it does in terms of saying what's going on there. I'm thinking mostly about those frontage, that triangular piece. We finitely define them into the 2 pieces. And again, Ryan, what is the designation of those wetlands? Is that a type 1, 2, or 3 manipulable? Can we mitigate those?
Sometimes mitigating for economic development is a challenge, but I've specifically talked about this area, and if, say, depending on what you propose there, if it was parking lot, because we have safety issues out here with parking. So to plop a building in that area, that might be more of a challenge, but if you were expanding, you know, parking uses, I think that'd be a path to go down. But what you would have to do is just run it through the current process. I don't know what the type is off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking about that one wetland that intrudes and separates the 2 properties.
Outlot B was a mitigated wetland, so that's probably something you don't want to deal with.
Outlot B, okay.
That's that wetland that's on the west side of 206, that's always been there. The water body down at the corner of the 2 streets, that's a stormwater man-made pond. And then, so that pond overflows into the wetland, and that wetland has an outlet where it runs right down the lot line out to Fenway.
Okay. Well, I'm just still thinking that those 2 pieces of property, if you take the least buildable areas and make some trades and manipulate the game a bit, I have drawn at least at one point in time a 50 to 60,000 square foot multiple use tenant, which was at one time in the marketplace an exciting alternate to individual businesses going on the 2 properties. And so I'd just like to see if there can't be a mix of more flexible usage where we don't preclude the idea that that could be one site if in fact you took that deep finger and shallowed it and put some of that wetland elsewhere on that site or on other properties. We have the other property that I keep thinking about further south yet. That we could show a different horizon that an appraiser would look at differently. A marketplace for a multi-tenant building versus two independent businesses is a different story.
This triangle piece, I would love to see a business that comes in here that works Monday through Friday and builds a parking lot on the south rectangle piece. And we have a shared agreement that the city could use that for the Fenway Athletic events on the weekends because, just another thing to know, Fenton Avenue used to be a 2-lane road. But to try to add parking, we have now made that a 1-way road and
Right.
striped diagonal parking
Right.
after the fact to pick up several more spaces. We have done a lot of cost estimating and stuff that would incorporate a parking lot there. But if that could be the parking lot that served the business on the north side of that triangle property and had a nice little landscape walkway in between there, which goes over the top of the storm sewer pipe crossing, you get a win-win. So if you could get that land off the books, but have them build a parking lot for shared use, I think that's a win-win, and then you get the tax base.
But see, there's the flexibility in thinking that really helps someone who appraises and or sells and markets a piece of property and helps a buyer understand that they've got more options than just what literally shows up here.
And I don't disagree with that. I think that we need to get the baseline established. I mean, I think we need to look at currently what's here, versus, if you look at those two parcels, and it could very well come back that, given the irregularity of them, that the price separately is going to be too low. And if we can start to say, what the more current per square foot price is, based on if it's combined, I think at some point, once you get the baselines, then you can start to you have a numbers that then you can start to take through and actually make some pretty concrete assumptions based on. I think right now to start doing, to play every possibility out, you're going to have an appraisal booklet that's going to be 75 pages long with every option. And I would recommend kind of sticking with more a baseline here. And then we may say, if we combine these two, for that more, interesting use, the price per square foot could go up. However, that could also delay project being landed there by another year or two because of, there's a lot of factors that play into these.
Well, I understand it, but when it comes to the point of interaction between seller and buyer, that moment of interaction, they have a certain number of tools to deal with and a certain amount of flexibility to talk about. And I've never yet heard a discussion, that says, I'll take price into consideration, I'll take negotiating land use into consideration. It seems like we never get to that point. And that's when the final marketer comes on board, whoever it's going to be brokering this, the city or otherwise, the tools they use and what happens in negotiation. This is just like a starting point. But we never seem to, I'm just really curious about what Gone has experienced because I don't think they've probably done much of an experience beyond the sign and the MinCar and that's about it.
How long has the listing been expired?
The one I was able to find in our archives, I think, was 2 years or a year. I mean, it's been a while.
Okay.
And have they approached to say to reinstate? Okay.
But in full transparency, that was the last iteration I found in our file. I don't know if there's somewhere that was somebody else did not file, but I know it's been expired for a while on this listing agreement.
I think a little bit of question of what's the next best steps to take, but I think overall, I think it's important for us to take a different look at this if that's a different look at the listing agent, a different look at lot configuration, whatever it takes, because we do have a significant investment that's built into this site, and with that negative fund balance hanging out there, it is a limiter for us to be able to do other things on other properties. And we've gotten to a spot in overall development in this section of the city where it is an open blank space, and we don't, as a city, necessarily need to be in this business. And so one of the things to consider is we could sell it to somebody else who is going to hold it for investment. We don't necessarily need to be the one that does it, holds it all the way through. And so I think part of what I'd like to start is just conversation on options. I think we need some more information to support some of those decisions. And I think one of the things we might want to consider is do we sell it to somebody else who is going to hold for ultimate investment? Or are we taking a long-term view? And if we are taking a long-term view, getting information on pricing and kind of what an expectation to your discussion point about how fast these properties are moving. We should get some refreshed information. Also, and ultimately, valuation is always important, and if a appraisal helps us to make better decisions, I think that's well worth it.
And, not to throw another monkey wrench in it, but at the airport commission meeting, talking to the two airport engineers as part of their planning, they looked at this and they saw the 2 3-acre sites as, oh, that's a great spot to site a commercial aviation business because it's airport adjacent, it's industrial, tie the thing around. And I'd never considered that use before, but they looked at it from a different lens. I mean, there are, locationally it does offer some different potential uses for it, but I think if we're trying to sell it at $325 a square foot, and we've had it on the market for 10 years with very little interest, I mean, that's indications to me that we're missing market. Considering that we've gone through a relatively robust construction, cycle here, and we've had a few pings on it, but nothing really has climbed to the top.
I've got a question on the pricing. Like the bottom lot, the 5.08 gross acres, and then 2.51 net. Are you charging the per square footage on the gross or the net?
That is a good question. I don't know if I have that off the top.
And a point of clarification, staff's not the one that set the pricing or has the pricing set, it's listing agent, but.
Well, the reason I ask is if half of it is water, you can't charge, well, you could, but you can't sell, charging the same square footage for water that they can't use. So
When I just did the math on it, it's currently listed right now as its gross, its total state. So everything that's there, if you add them all up, it's a little over 15 acres. So that's how that's how it's positioned right now. It's the total, it's the gross, not the net. That's what's being listed per.
And it's being listed as the full 15 acres,
Correct.
correct? Not
Yep.
the individual parcels. But still. your point.
And that's the one listing I saw in Mincar, but if I'm looking at Mincar and I'm looking for a 3-acre site, I'm not gonna look at it. And if I'm looking at a 15-acre site, I'm not gonna look at it because when I dive down to the brochure, there's that misalignment that takes place. So my estimation, you're better off putting this forward as 4 different sites on Mincar. So then if you're looking for the 3-acre site, there's 2 options, right? There's, 4 of them that would fit. And then you can start having a conversation. I'm like, oh, the 4-acre site's a little bigger than I want, but when I start looking at what's developable, it's in my ballpark now, and can maybe I work on the price since I'm not getting, so it keeps that conversation going. But if I'm looking for a 15-acre site, I'm pretty tied into that 15-acre site. Nothing here is going to match that criteria.
Question, did I miss, was there an estimate on the getting the appraisal cost?
I don't have a cost estimate at this point. I mean, I asked for 1 document, 4 lots individual, so it's not just 4 separate. I said, give me 1 document. That's what I asked for, because again, it's easier to look at these as a total to kind of lighten this as a complete puzzle. I mean, a complete picture, so the document that, when I get the estimate back, we'll have 1 document, but each one of these lots will be listed individually in there, so we have it in just 1 document format, not 4 separate appraisals.
So I guess it makes sense just to at least get a price on that. And I understand your thought too, Mark, but let's just get a price on that. And the other thing is, clearly I think we need a new broker. I mean, if they haven't called us to let us know it expired, there's no interest there to market it. So I think or decide we're going to try to market it ourselves.
It is still on the card, all right.
It's on, the Mincar listing was current from this afternoon. And I mean, it's starting to migrate in. I mean, with Invest in Forest Lake website, that's now a piece there. We do have the flyover shots. There's a little bit of effort on the internal side. It's, trying to get some of these things, put some pieces there, but I mean, obviously a broker is going to have a little bit more reach than a city will.
So direction to staff are we confirmed on direction to staff to bring back some pricing for an estimate? And also, do we also want to see some suggested next steps related to broker listing? Yes. Yeah.
One other thing, not that we want to get back into the business of giving away land, but that, you know, that site, the first site that sold was, I believe, for $1 or something. So I don't know if we want to get creative there or at least start thinking about that if,
Well, I was kind of thinking along those lines, but what would the benefit here for the city be? That what if you sent out an RFP or proposal, maybe you gave that triangle piece for $1, but then you assigned all the fees that would be applicable to that site redevelopment, also requiring that southern rectangle portion be a shared parking lot, and here's the dimensions it needs to be and stuff like that.
So.
I'm just throwing an
I
idea out
think-
there because I know how bad parking is and it influences some of your events, and if we are looking to expand in some of the area of the traded land that we have, parking is gonna be more critical. So if you could get somebody to pay for it and maintain the parking, and you just use it on weekends,
So the economics of the Team Vantage site, helpful to just kind of get a recap on where we are from that initial investment. And certainly there's been positive property value, and that's been a big success, both in terms of jobs as well as land use. And so I think my goal is, I think we should just get an idea flow of different options and continue conversations exactly like this to kind of land on a revised strategy that might help kind of increase overall traffic and interest. I also, you mentioned the airport, interest on the part of the airport engineers on airport-type businesses, and that's, of course, a great marketing asset. I also wonder if, at some point, if we've done ourselves a perhaps disservice by calling it the Airport Business Park. Doesn't necessarily strike the most vibrant picture, and so I think there's some perhaps overall marketing that might want to be reassessed. But at this point, I think understanding some more of the economics of the property, and just start getting some additional ideas in front of this group would be good. Anything else? Okay. Very good. Next item, Humphrey Institute Downtown Study Update. Dan?
Yep. President, members of the EDA. So last July, I introduced the kind of the concept about having the Humphrey Institute come out and do a study of our downtown corridor. Since we've last met, I did work with the professor to kind of develop a scope of work, kind of a project scope for what a downtown study would look like. Went down to the Humphrey Institute on September 11th and actually met with the team that will actually be performing the study. Right now, there's 3 students who are currently assigned to the project, and they are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. They are raring to go on the project, which was great to see. I actually walked out of there kind of like, you can definitely tell they're in the full, onset of their academic career, because they were dropping concepts on me that I'm like, okay, haven't heard that for a while. But basically what we kind of talked about was the scope, kind of went through the scope. So what they're going to focus on is a deliverable that we're going to get is they're going to be doing a downtown business inventory. So they're going to go through inventory of businesses that are currently in our downtown area. When I talked to the professor, he asked not only for the downtown area, but any other kind of areas within the city that has a retail component to it. And so I did rough out kind of where the I-35 corridor, and I said that's more big box, downtown's more kind of traditional small business retail. And they just wanted to see what we're kind of competing against locally. So the students have kind of both drawings there. And in fact, when I walked into the classroom, there was this drawing on the board that kind of roughly envisioned both areas on the thing. And I actually was able to pick up what that was from the map. But they're looking at that because they want to see what the downtown area competes against both locally and kind of on a regional aspect. So once they kind of go through, get the business area identified, then they're going to determine what this Forest Lakes trade area is going to be. And they're going to start to dive into the trade area, look at current demographics, and they're also going to look at what the projected demographics is for the trade area. And then they're going to compare us with another kind of established retail area. I recommended they use White Bear Lake because it has more kind of a downtown setting, again, a lake adjacent, 61 is a component of that as well. So they're going to be kind of looking at White Bear Lake. And I also just kind of said, this is your guys' project. What do you guys want to kind of focus on? And, what makes this interesting for you? One thing, a couple of the students that are working on the project have backgrounds, and one works as currently interning for the Met Council, and one is currently interning for MnDOT, and they kind of have a a focus on public transportation and parking. So I said, if you want to kind of roll some of that up into this study as well, they both kind of lit up when I mentioned the potential about a parking component to this. So they're going to be looking at parking. I don't know what that's going to look like from a full study perspective, because I think they also kind of looked at this initial project scope and it's like, oh, that's not very much. And you actually dive down, it's a pretty big, just doing trade area and retail analysis is a pretty big study. But they are going to be looking at potentially, if time allows, and they're going to tack a parking area, a parking assessment on there as well. So we should be getting a very nice document out of this. The first check-in I have with the students is in mid-October. I'll check in with them just to kind of see where they are, see what questions they have. The deliverables, so the study will be delivered to the city in December. They won't come out and present to the EDA just because of, that's when their schedule, their classes break for the semester. But I'll meet with them kind of prior to getting the report, get teed up on what it is. So I'll be able to present in their stead. I will offer to them though, however, if they want to come and get some experience, delivering a presentation, that they're able to do so. I just don't know I don't want to force them to do so, because obviously by the time they'd be able to come in, the class would be over with, which they'd be on to the next project at that point. But overall, I think it's going to be a great project. There's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm with the group of students that are working on it. So looking forward to the work that they're going to do and seeing the final report.
Terrific.
I love the fresh collegiate view of things. It can be pretty shocking but exciting in the same hand.
It was actually very refreshing. I walked out of there kind of going like, I mean, you can definitely tell they really know their theories, but applying them in the real world, that kind of enthusiasm is very refreshing to see.
That's great. It's great to have that opportunity, and I'm excited to see their report. And certainly, if there's anything this group can provide for them as they're going through their process, happy to do so. All right, that is the end of our stated agenda this evening. Is there any other items to come before the EDA?
Can I
Blake?
just quick question on regarding the budget. Last meeting we went was before the budget process really started, and I know we talked a little bit about it, but where did that land and feedback on the council and all that? I'm surprised that wasn't included in part of this since the levy was.
Do you want to do a?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Are you talking in specific EDA budget? Or
Yeah, I'm sorry, EDA, yeah, like.
Okay, well, the EDA still has a budget of $50,000 to determine what they want to do with those funds. That should cover some of the things that we've talked about, so we haven't changed that at all with the new budget. And since the budget was already almost finished when we did talk, I think there's plenty of room in there because you haven't really spent that much money this year yet either, so.
Okay, there was just kind of a lack of conversation amongst us about that, so I just was looking for that.
So could we have in a future EDA meeting, could we do an update on year-to-date financials for the EDA? I think it's been a while since this body has seen updated financial statements. I think we used to see it at least quarterly. It'd be good to see an update, and to Patrick's point, there is still a considerable amount of space in the 2019 budget. And then there's, with that placeholder for $50,000 for next year's EDA budget, there is still time for us to kind of talk about how we might want to break that up into specific projects for 2020. So there's still certainly room for that conversation.
We have residual funds as well from previous years, do we not? Holdovers?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what the amount is, but I believe there's somewhat of a fund balance. I just don't know what that is offhand.
Okay.
I do think it's helpful for this body to have such an overall view of, in perspective of the overall city budget. And so tonight, City Council is deep into budget season. We've had a number of budget workshops. At tonight's council meeting, we will adopt what we call the preliminary levy, which is the preliminary budget number that is the maximum amount that we could charge. That is the amount that is printed on everybody's truth and taxation statements, and the amount that we will then consider when we do final budget adoption in December. There is certainly room for wiggle room between categories or for overall levy amounts to come down. We can't go over the max of what we're going to set tonight. So there's room for additional discussion. And then also I'd like to just welcome everybody on the EDA too. We're doing 2 open house conversations to do a full presentation of what is planned for the 2020 budget. Thursday, October 3rd from 6 to 7:30 upstairs in the community room. We'll have a community open house, and then we will have an identical session on Friday, October 4th from 11:30 to 1. It's intended to be a fairly informal opportunity to get questions answered, hopefully have lots of free conversation. We will start each of those sessions off with a presentation just to outline kind of where we are coming in 2019 and what the major goals are for 2020, and then certainly opportunity for discussion. Part of that budget, and some members of the EDA may have already caught up. There's been some newspaper articles on what's planned for the budget, but one of the things that's being contemplated is a refinance of this building. Members of the EDA will remember that this building is currently sitting on a bond that was issued by the EDA, and there's a leaseback transaction for the city. We, under a refinance agreement, would put that underneath the city as a general obligation bond. It's more of just an administrative task for the EDA at this point, but a point of conversation certainly because many of you on the EDA at that time were part of that original bond issuance. So
Yeah, and the refinancing saves us about $1 million over the life of the bond.
hence the reason to do said refinancing. We're in a fantastic interest rate environment right now. So, and I'd welcome you to come to those sessions just to kind of hear the overall perspective. We as a body, have an ability to have a lot of financial impact to the city, and so having a kind of a fresh view and perspective of council's priorities and what we are lining out as kind of the necessary elements for 2020, I think is great information for all of you. So,
Other items?
any other items?
I have just a couple small ones. I have talked to the Lions in general about the benches, part of the downtown beautification.
Mm-hmm.
They have a budget meeting on October 8th. If we could, before then, present to them, they like the formal request coming from a known body, so it's at the EDA or otherwise, it's probably the EDA, requesting that they consider in their budget X number of benches and some sense about where we think we would plant those benches. If we had a bit of a locational effort and a request that came from a formal body, you'd get a hearing from them and they would think about it for their budget.
And what date did you say that budget comes?
October 8th.
Okay.
And so previously, the beautification group somehow located the pots that they presently wanted. The benches are located somehow in a document as well. Maybe we can just simply improve that document to account for X number of benches. They just want a specific request.
And has the bench numbers and locations, has that already been decided by a group?
I don't think so.
When I worked
I've
at
heard,
the group, it was just strictly pots. Benches were not part of that conversation.
so as they think about, do we just engage that group somehow here and see if we can get them looking at this idea of pots and benches and numbers?
Blake and I just met with a small contingency of them right before this meeting, and that did not come up. But maybe take this offline with staff, and we can talk about maybe who's the best to come up with that number. I'm not sure. I have no qualms about making the request. I'm just not sure who or kind of number and location of what's been decided.
Okay,
Is that on the Lions part, is that something that has to happen at this budget meeting? Or is there something that can be said that we're interested, but we just need to kind of come up with a plan or a form request? Or can we do that in that shorter period of time?
I honestly don't know. I think the biggest thing to them is to know that there's an idea and there's an official group that wants that idea taken care of. They've sort of gone down that path and we've tried to get money from them and other donations from them. And so if we can just simply say, here's a group we would like to develop, you could put a number to it or just hold the number back, I suppose. Would you allocate some budget or toward the idea of benches in the future? I know that Jenny might know better how
Well,
to
the
approach
Lions
this.
budget is approved in June, so they've got the money for the year, but they do want a letter of request for the funds, and they're very generous and very open about
Yes, they are.
funding things for the city, so it's just a matter of getting somebody to sit down and write it.
Okay.
Another thought is that in the past, we've talked about bringing forward site recommendations that could move forward into the county grant proposition that we've had before. So I've handed off my thoughts about a couple sites. I was wondering if we could initiate others to bring in their site recommendations so that we could actually move this forward to an action of selection of a site to be proposed to the county for a grant.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're looking for.
Well, the county's willing to be our partner in the future with even additional efforts. What we have to do is present them with some requests. And if we could select sites that we think fit what we're trying to accomplish, then we just go through the process we've gone through before, but we're not presenting them with these potential sites. And so I was hoping we could bring forward sites and talk about them and make a selection and see if we couldn't get on this year's budget or next year's budget, but start moving on that path.
Is there a list of sites that have been considered in the past and we just haven't bundled things together to be considered? I also appreciate that we've had, between the Airport Business Park and Headwaters 123, we've had a number of requests already, and so we want to make sure we're being strategic in those requests, but certainly I don't have a problem with when there's a use case to extending to that channel. I don't mind doing so. I just,
So there is a list that was brought forward maybe a year ago, a year and a half ago. The intent was to focus on city-owned parcels to begin with, because obviously we have control of the land that's underlying there. So that's where we kind of started to focus on, and, realizing that, we could bring these forward, but there's also limited statute in terms of what, we can get accomplished in, the time between meetings. So, we can take a look, and the two applications we made this year were focused on the headwaters and the downtown sewer studies. So we're kind of, again, focusing on those, applications. We do have one potentially already earmarked for next year, which would be the next generation of the downtown, the analysis portion of the downtown study, but there are a couple opportunities in next year's grant cycle for additional parcels to be evaluated.
okay.
So there's a log jam in doing it, is what I'm reading here.
Well, the resources, you gotta allocate resources where it needs to go, and, if we're, going on the headwaters, there's a lot of work that's been done on the headwaters parcel, a lot of work that's been going on downtown, and, if that's kind of the focus, we're, again, focusing on city-owned controlled land, once we kind of clear those logs, then I think we could potentially move into those secondary sites that aren't on city control, but again, the initial thought was to focus on those sites that the city is owner of, so we have a little bit bigger of a hand in terms of helping guide where those studies can go.
Well, two I've proposed are partially city-owned. If you want to call the flyover zone, would be city-owned uniquely, but it has to consider its context, and then the other one is. At any rate, I guess I'll have to wait for you to tell us when we might be able to step into a new arena.
Well, I'd guess I'd recommend that we did do a work plan, or a working session on kind of what's next for 2020 work plan items and what's next. And so I think having those priorities come back would help to inform when is the next best time for one of those studies, or what is the next best target. So perhaps agenda time should be reserved for a future meeting, both on kind of revisiting that work plan, and then also certainly budget amount itself is certainly set, but there's a lot of discussion around prioritization of that budget amount that I think would still be good for EDA to have further conversation on. Okay. Anything else to come before the EDA this evening? Not hearing anything, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second that?
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we're adjourned.